What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Blue Blood Sports TV, back at y'all with another one. So, three-division world champion, undefeated, former junior welterweight, undisputed world champion, currently the WBO welterweight world champion, who is widely considered the number one pound-for-pound boxer in the world, Terence Bud Crawford, has been the subject and the topic of the sporting boxing world. With that said, Terence Crawford and his team took to social media and they had some words, interesting words for undefeated, unified WBC, IBF welterweight world champion superstar boxer Errol Spence Jr. and Errol Spence Jr.'s current trainer, who is trainer of the year, who has two unified world champions in the sport of boxing currently, simultaneously, right now. He has junior middleweight unified world champion superstar boxer Jamel Charlo, and he has obviously Errol Spence Jr. With that said, you're going to see a lot of interviews in the build-up for Errol Spence Jr.'s showdown with two-division world champion, former junior welterweight unified world champion, and former welterweight WBC world champion superstar boxer Danny Swift Garcia, what is set to take place December 5th in Dallas, Texas at AT&T Stadium, the Cowboy Stadium. With that said, obviously there's going to be a lot of interviews on their part, and the biggest fight in the sport of boxing is the fight between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. So anytime there's a camera or a microphone in the vicinity of Errol Spence or Terence Crawford, they're going to be asked about the other. If there's Terence Crawford is being interviewed, he's going to be asked about a possible showdown with Errol Spence Jr. And if Errol Spence Jr. is interviewed, he's going to be asked about Terence Bud Crawford. And if their trainers are interviewed, if Brian McIntyre, trainer and manager of Terence Bud Crawford, is interviewed, he is going to be asked about Errol Spence. And if Derrick James is interviewed, he's going to be asked about Terence Crawford. Because this is the biggest fight in the sport of boxing. With that said, Team Crawford did not like how Derrick James and Errol Spence recently viewed the fight with Terence Crawford. Obviously, Errol Spence said if he faces off against Terence Crawford and starts negotiations, it is going to have to be a 60-40 split because he's the clear-cut A-side, no doubt about it. He said the proof is in the pudding. Look at the pay-per-view numbers. Look at the fighters that I'm fighting, the high-profile fights, and the level of opponents that I'm fighting compared to the level of opponents he's fighting, the pay-per-view numbers he's done, so on and such. The proof is in the pudding. I'm the clear A-side, so it have to be a 60-40 split. With that said, Terence Crawford responded, and he said it'll have to be a 60-40 split in his favor because he's more accomplished overall in his totality than Errol Spence Jr. Derrick James, the trainer of Errol Spence Jr., stated that Terence Crawford's resume is just not deep. He said he has the weakest resume of all the pound-for-pound fighters in the world currently today, and that didn't bowl over well with Terence Crawford and Team Crawford. Neither did the comments from Errol Spence. So they took to social media and they stated that, Errol Spence needs to, at this point in time, they understand that he has the game sold up. They understand that, he has all the big fighters on his side of the street with the PBC, Premier Boxing Champions, with Al Heyman, who's the advisor and founder of the PBC. You have two-time welterweight world champion superstar boxer Showtime Sean Porter. You have former unified WBC, WBA welterweight world champion superstar boxer Keith one-time Thurman. You have currently the WBA regular champion Yordenis Ugas. You obviously have Danny Garcia and Errol Spence. So all of the big-name welterweight fights for Terence Crawford legacy fights reside at the PBC, the Premier Boxing Champions. So with that said, Bernie, whom particularly I'm speaking of with Team Crawford, stated that Terence Crawford had a lot to say himself, but he decided, to pull back, and he gave Bernie the reins and gave him the green light to do so. So with that said, he stated that he understands and they understand that Errol Spence has the game sold up as far as the level of opponents over there with the PBC. He says, but at the same token, Errol Spence is not doing the big numbers Errol Spence is not fighting big fights. He says that just essentially cut it out, stop all the talking, just shut up and sign the contract, and let's make the fight happen. He says that we don't have to bicker back and forth. We could be cordial. We know we're going to have to fight. We know we're going to cross paths. So why go back and forth with the insults to one another? How about we just stay cordial to one another and focus on the fight? And let's do, and essentially he's alluding to, let's just do a 50-50 fight, 50-50 deal, where he's saying that, Errol Spence is not doing big numbers. Errol Spence is not the big fish. So he's saying that we're going to have cross paths, so on and such, right? With that said, I have to beg to differ. Errol Spence obviously is doing the heavy lifting. That's why they acknowledge the fact that Errol Spence has the game sewed up and he's making the big fights with the better fighters and the higher level opposition and the higher profile fights. That's why he said you have the game sold up. You can't say he has the game sold up on that side of the street and in the same token says he's not doing anything big or major. Errol Spence has done 350,000 pay-per-view buys when he fought 4-division world champion Mexican superstar boxer Mikey Garcia. He did 325,000 reported buys, pay-per-view buys when he fought Showtime Sean Porter, and he unified in that fight. So he's going into this fight. That fight with Sean Porter was September 28th, 2019, and 12 days later he suffered a horrific car accident, October 10th. And a lot of people didn't think he would return to the sport of boxing. People thought that maybe he returns to the sport of boxing, but he's not the same. There's a lot of people that think that there's going to be some lingering mental and physical effects from the car accident. So there's a lot of intrigue. This is a pay-per-view fight between Danny Garcia and Sean Porter that will take place. Danny Garcia and Errol Spence that will take place next Saturday night, December 5th. And there's a lot of intrigue, there's a lot of curiosity. Everybody wants to see if we're going to get the same version of Errol Spence that, immediately followed the Sean Porter fight or going into the Sean Porter fight. Errol Spence obviously vows to be even better than that version of Errol Spence. We saw guys like Vinny Pazienza, who broke his neck in a car accident, came back and was even better than what he was prior to the car accident. So, Errol Spence is expecting the same type of results. He's expecting to be better. He says he's far more committed to the sport of boxing than he's ever have been. He's understand what the sport of boxing awards him, to take care of his family, his children, so he says that he's more appreciative of the sport of boxing than ever before. He's definitely focused. He's locked in. Physically, you've seen him hitting the heavy bag for about 4 or 5 straight rounds in his media workout. His body looks back to normal. Obviously, he had some dental work done. So, when you look at his features, he had implants, teeth implants, right? Because he lost some teeth. So, a lot of people are saying that his words are slurring and he's not talking the same. Well, when you have implants and you change your teeth, some people just have it cosmetic surgery, and it takes them a very long time to get acclimated to having new teeth, a foreign object in the mouth. So with that said, everybody's going to be intrigued and everybody's going to be interested. So I'm expecting this pay-per-view event to be a very, very successful pay-per-view outing because it's a high-profile fight. And not to mention there's a lot of intrigue because a lot of people want to see how Errol Spence bounces back. Is he the same? Also, there's a PBC fighter, newly signed. He's been there for a couple years now. 8-division world champion, superstar, Filipino iconic boxer who's currently the WBA welterweight world champion, Manny Pac-Man Pacquiao. That's a fight that he is, again, on the other side of the street. And then he stands to Errol Spence, that is. He has a advantage in securing the fight with Manny Pacquiao over Terence Crawford, who continues to be promised a Manny Pacquiao fight by his promoter, legendary promoter, top-ranked CEO, Bob Arum, who said that this fight between Manny Pacquiao was supposed to take place November 14th, but due to the Board of Health stepping in overseas and not allowing fans in attendance, thus the purses wasn't there for the fighters. So they had to replace him with former IBF welterweight world champion, British superstar boxer Special K. Kell Brook. But Manny Pacquiao had agreed, according to Bob Arum, to make this fight. This has been ongoing since 2014. They've been talking about a possible fight between Manny Pacquiao and Terence Bud Crawford. But like I said, Errol Spence seems to have an advantage there because Manny Pacquiao is signed to the PBC and Terence Crawford is signed to Top Rank. And with that said, if Bob Arum is not willing to pay Manny Pacquiao the money he's looking for, Bob Arum recently stated when Manny Pacquiao fought four-division world champion Adrian the Problem Broner, superstar boxer, he said that they paid Manny Pacquiao $20 to $25 million for a fight that only did 400 pay-per-view buys, and that's just not gonna cut it. He says I'm lucky that it wasn't me that had to pay Manny Pacquiao such money. Well, Manny Pacquiao also got paid around the same amount of money for the Keith Thurman fight, and those pay-per-views did about the same, maybe just slightly more, right? It didn't do more than 600,000 pay-per-view buys. So it just did maybe 200,000 more pay-per-view buys. So when you look at it from that aspect, Manny Pacquiao is going to demand $20 to $25 million for a fight with Terence Crawford, and I don't know if Bob Arum is willing to pay that type of money for a Manny Pacquiao fight because he don't believe that Manny Pacquiao is worth it. He don't believe he could get the return for his investment, and he's not excited to, dish out and doge out that type of money to Manny Pacquiao. So I highly doubt that Manny Pacquiao and Terence Crawford fight before Errol Spence gets the Manny Pacquiao fight. And Manny Pacquiao on his social media is pointing in the direction of four-division world champion Mexican superstar boxer Mikey Garcia. And then he's looking to face UFC superstar Conor McGregor. But he's making no mention of Terence Crawford. So they're saying that Team Crawford is stating that Terence Crawford is doing, similar numbers. But combined numbers, his two pay-per-views with Victor Postol and his pay-per-views with Amir Khan have done a combined 210,000 pay-per-view sales. So it did 150,000 pay-per-view sales with Amir Khan, and it topped out at 60,000 pay-per-views with Victor Postol. So combine those, and it's 210,000 pay-per-views in two pay-per-views. But you combine Errol Spence's pay-per-views, and he did 350 with Mikey Garcia and 325 with Sean Porter, and that is 675,000 pay-per-views. So that is a huge difference in pay-per-view sales, and I'm almost certain that this fight with Danny Garcia is not going to do anything less than 350,000 pay-per-views. I'm expecting it to do about 400,000 pay-per-views because the intrigue, the curiosity, and everybody's just interested. All eyes will be on Errol Spence and Danny Garcia December 5th because everybody wants to see how Errol Spence is going to look. Okay, so with that, just the intrigue alone is going to sell this fight, and it's going to do a successful pay-per-view numbers. So then you combine those. Now he's done over 1 million pay-per-view buys compared to Terence Crawford's 200,000. So it's not close to who's the A side. Yes, me as a fan, I want to see the best fight the best, but you have to be realistic. The sport of boxing is definitely a business. This is a part of it, a huge part of it. Yes, it's being negotiated in the public, unlike before. But there was fighters in yesteryear that negotiated fights in the public eye. Sugar Ray Robinson used to wait until the day of the fight to pull out the fight and demand more money, negotiating in the locker room before his fight. So this is nothing new, that fighters want to use as much leverage as possible to maximize as much revenue as possible. So when you have Team Crawford saying just shut up and sign the contract to Errol Spence, it's a 50-50 contract. It's truly not. And then you have Terence Crawford, who's now claiming that Errol Spence fight is not that important. If it happens, it happens. If it don't, it don't. So why are you saying that? Telling Errol Spence to just essentially go ahead and sign the contract and make the fight happen because you're not doing big numbers. But when you look at the proof is in the pudding, as Errol Spence said, the numbers are there. This is a fight, that's a huge fight. You had a guy at one point in time in Floyd Mayweather, who was a superstar, was a multi-division world champion. By the time he took on Oscar De La Hoya. Floyd Mayweather was already a champion at 130, 135, and 140 by the time he took on Oscar De La Hoya at 147. At 147, well, actually, the fight took place at 154. Okay, so he was already a multi-division world champion. But guess what? Floyd Mayweather, who is today's time the most successful boxer in the history of boxing, took a 70-30 split with Oscar De La Hoya, in which Oscar De La Hoya chose the ring size, he chose the glove size, he had the advantage because he was the A side, and Floyd Mayweather said, okay, he would, bend and allow Oscar De La Hoya to be the A side and act as the A side, because he knew once he was victorious, then he would be the shot caller when the roles were reversed once he beat Oscar De La Hoya. So he took a 70-30 split. That's unheard of when you mention Floyd Mayweather and you have somebody taking a whopping 70% over him, only taking 30%. Now you look back at that, you look at Floyd Mayweather today's time, can you imagine Floyd Mayweather at any point in time taking a 70-30 split in favor of his opponent? Well, Floyd Mayweather understood the business part about it, and he understood what he stood to gain in the future. On the part of Errol Spence and Terence Crawford, Errol Spence is the clear A side when it comes to the business part. Terence Crawford came into Errol Spence's division. Errol Spence was already considered top 2 in the welterweight division at that point in time. Keith Thurman was the best welterweight in the world. He's since lost to Manny Pacquiao. But, Errol Spence was definitely top 2, and Terence Crawford came into his division, and the level of competition he's fighting at welterweight compared to the level of competition Errol Spence is fighting at the welterweight is simply just not that close. So to tell him just sign the contract as a 50-50, it's not going to happen. So let's see what happens. Let's see how Errol Spence responds. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what y'all think. Y'all already know what it is. It's your boy Blue Blood Sports TV. Hate, like, comment, and subscribe. You haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the bell icon to get all the new notification. Follow me on Instagram at Blue Blood Sports TV, all one word. Y'all already know what it is. Shout out to the entire LDBC. Shout out to New Media. Shout out to Black Media Row. Make sure you like and share these videos. That's all I got for y'all. Peace.